What if one moment of cruelty could destroy everything you've built? Patricia knelt on the cold marble floor of the Grandview Hotel's executive dining room, her hands trembling as she reached for the scattered breadcrumbs. The expensive suit-clad man towering above her had just knocked her cleaning cart over, spilling everything across the pristine floor. "Clean it up with your hands," he'd commanded, his voice dripping with disgust. "People like you should know your place." She'd worked in hotels for 15 years, enduring countless indignities, but something about this moment felt different. As she gathered the debris, her fingers brushed against the small badge hidden beneath her uniform, a badge that could change everything. The other hotel guests watched in uncomfortable silence, some pulling out their phones. What they didn't know was that Patricia held a secret that would transform this humiliation into justice. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Patricia Collins had seen it all during her years in hospitality. At 36, she'd cleaned countless hotel rooms, scrubbed endless floors, and learned to make herself invisible to the wealthy guests who treated her like furniture. The Grandview Hotel was supposed to be different, a prestigious establishment where respect and elegance mattered. But behind its gleaming facade, Patricia had witnessed things that would shock anyone who believed in basic human decency. The man responsible for her humiliation was Bradley Thornton, 42 years old and heir to a real estate empire worth millions. He owned 3 hotels in the city and was known for his ruthless business practices and complete disregard for anyone he considered beneath him. His employees whispered stories about his explosive temper and cruel treatment of staff, but fear of losing their jobs kept them silent. What Bradley didn't realize was that Patricia wasn't just another cleaning lady trying to make ends meet. 3 months ago, she'd accepted a position with the state health department as an undercover inspector. Her extensive experience in hotels made her the perfect candidate to investigate complaints about unsafe working conditions and health violations that regular inspectors couldn't catch. The Grandview had been on their radar for months. Reports of contaminated food storage, unsafe chemical handling, and worker exploitation had reached the authorities. As Patricia continued cleaning the floor under Bradley's watchful glare, she mentally catalogued everything she'd observed over the past weeks. The kitchen staff forced to work with expired ingredients, the laundry room where chemicals were mixed without proper ventilation, the storage areas where food was kept at dangerous temperatures. Most disturbing of all was the culture of fear Bradley had created, where employees were too terrified to report violations that could make guests seriously ill. "Hurry up," Bradley snapped, checking his gold watch. "I have important guests arriving for dinner, and I won't have them see this mess." His voice carried across the dining room, drawing disapproving looks from the few patrons seated nearby. An elderly couple at a corner table shook their heads in disgust at his behavior. Patricia's supervisor, Maria, appeared in the doorway. She was a kind woman in her 50s who'd worked at the Grandview for over a decade. "Mr. Thornton, perhaps I could help," she began, but Bradley cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Stay out of this, Maria. Your employee needs to learn some responsibility." His words stung, but Patricia remained focused on her task. Each cruel comment was further evidence of the toxic environment that endangered both workers and guests. As she worked, Patricia noticed something that made her blood run cold. Near the kitchen entrance, she spotted a maintenance worker spraying what appeared to be industrial cleaner directly onto surfaces where food would be prepared. The chemical wasn't food safe, and using it in that area could cause serious illness or even death among dinner guests. She glanced at Bradley, who was now berating a young waiter for some minor infraction. His voice grew louder and more aggressive, creating a scene that other guests couldn't ignore. Several people were now recording the interaction, their faces showing clear disapproval of his behavior. The moment of reckoning was approaching, but Patricia needed to see how far Bradley's cruelty would go. After Patricia finished cleaning the floor, Bradley wasn't satisfied. He examined her work with the scrutiny of someone looking for any excuse to continue his abuse of power. "This is unacceptable," he declared loudly, gesturing at a spot that looked perfectly clean to everyone watching. "Do it again, and this time, do it properly." The elderly couple Patricia had noticed earlier stood up from their table. The woman approached cautiously, her husband close behind. "Excuse me," she said to Bradley, her voice gentle but firm. "Is this really necessary? She's done a fine job." The woman's name was Helen, and she'd been coming to the Grandview for over 20 years with her husband Robert. They'd celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, and special occasions in this dining room, but they'd never witnessed such cruelty. Bradley turned his attention to Helen with obvious irritation. "Ma'am, this is hotel business. Please return to your table." His dismissive tone shocked both Helen and Robert, who'd always been treated with respect during their previous visits. "Young man," Robert interjected, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades in business, "we've been loyal customers here for 2 decades. We've never seen staff treated this way." Other guests began nodding in agreement, creating a circle of disapproval around Bradley. Instead of backing down, Bradley's anger intensified. "If you don't like how I run my hotel, you're welcome to leave," he snapped. "And take your outdated opinions with you." The gasps from other patrons were audible. Even the hotel's regular staff looked mortified by their owner's behavior. Patricia watched this exchange while still kneeling on the floor, her heart racing as she witnessed Bradley alienating longtime customers. She thought about her real mission here, the investigation that had already uncovered serious health violations. But seeing him treat elderly guests with such disrespect added a personal element to her professional duty. Maria stepped forward again, her face pale with worry. "Mr. Thornton, please. These are valued guests." "Maria, you're fired," Bradley announced without hesitation. "Clean out your office immediately." The shocked silence that followed was deafening. Maria had been a model employee, beloved by staff and guests alike. Her termination was so obviously unfair that several people began reaching for their phones to record what was happening. As Maria walked away with tears in her eyes, Patricia felt something break inside her chest. This wasn't just about health violations anymore, this was about basic human dignity. She watched Bradley's satisfied smirk as he surveyed the damage he'd caused, seemingly oblivious to the fact that his behavior was being documented by multiple witnesses. The young waiter Bradley had been scolding earlier approached Patricia quietly. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "He's not usually this bad in front of guests." But Patricia could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear she'd observed in every employee here. They were all prisoners in their own workplace, too afraid of losing their jobs to speak up against obvious injustice. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Bradley strutted toward the kitchen, probably to terrorize more staff members. Patricia remained on the floor, but her hand slowly moved toward the hidden badge beneath her uniform. The time for her true identity to be revealed was approaching, and Bradley had no idea that his world was about to change forever. 20 minutes later, Bradley returned to the dining room with a plate of food that had clearly been prepared hastily. He placed it on the floor next to Patricia with a cruel smile. "Since you seem comfortable down there, you can eat your dinner from the floor like the animal you are," he announced loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe that will teach you to do your job properly." The cruelty of this demand sent shockwaves through everyone present. Helen gasped audibly, while Robert stood up from his table in outrage. "This is absolutely unacceptable," he declared. "No human being should be treated this way." Other guests began voicing their agreement, creating a chorus of disapproval that filled the elegant dining room. Patricia stared at the plate on the floor, her mind racing. In all her years investigating workplace violations, she'd never encountered such blatant dehumanization. The food itself looked questionable. She could smell that something wasn't right about it, probably the same contaminated ingredients she'd been documenting for weeks. Bradley was literally asking her to consume potentially dangerous food from the floor like an animal. "I won't do it," Patricia said quietly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. This was the first time she'd directly refused one of Bradley's commands, and the dining room fell silent as everyone waited for his response. Bradley's face turned red with rage. "What did you say to me?" His voice was low and threatening, the kind of tone that had probably made countless employees cower in fear over the years. Patricia slowly stood up, her legs shaky but her resolve growing stronger. "I said I won't do it. No person should have to eat from the floor, no matter what job they have." Her words carried across the room, inspiring nods of support from the watching guests. "Then you're fired," Bradley screamed, completely losing control. "Get out of my hotel immediately. Security will escort you out if you don't leave voluntarily." He was so consumed with rage that he didn't notice Patricia's hand moving toward her uniform pocket. Helen stepped forward again, her elderly frame seemingly fragile but her voice strong. "We've seen enough," she told her husband loudly. "We're never coming back to this place." Several other guests began standing up, preparing to leave in protest of what they'd witnessed. But Bradley was beyond reason now. "Good. I don't want customers who think they can tell me how to run my business." His shouting was attracting attention from other parts of the hotel. Staff members were gathering in doorways, watching their boss's complete meltdown with a mixture of fear and fascination. Patricia looked around at all the faces, the horrified guests, the frightened employees, the disgusted onlookers who'd been documenting everything on their phones. She thought about Maria, fired for trying to protect a loyal customer. She thought about all the health violations she'd documented, all the ways Bradley was endangering people's lives through his negligence and cruelty. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. The moment had arrived. Patricia reached into her pocket and pulled out a small leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal her official badge. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice now carrying the authority of her real position, "I'm Patricia Collins, Senior Health Inspector with the State Department of Health, and you're about to have a very serious problem." The silence that followed Patricia's revelation was absolutely electric. Bradley's face went through several color changes, from red anger to white shock to a sickly green pallor as the implications hit him. Every person in that dining room understood that they just witnessed something extraordinary. Justice arriving in the most unexpected way possible. "That's impossible," Bradley stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating completely. "You're just a cleaning lady. I've seen you here for months." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the panic he was trying to hide. Patricia calmly pulled out her official documentation, including the court order that authorized her undercover investigation. "I've been conducting a comprehensive health and safety inspection of your facilities for the past 3 months, she explained, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to Bradley's growing hysteria. "What you've just witnessed is exactly the kind of workplace abuse and health violations that prompted our investigation." The guests who'd been recording everything looked amazed and delighted. Helen clapped her hands together with joy, while Robert shook his head in satisfaction. "Justice comes in mysterious ways," he murmured to his wife, loud enough for others to hear. Bradley's legs seemed to give out as he sank into the nearest chair. "This can't be happening," he whispered, running his hands through his hair. "You can't close my hotels over some minor violations. I'll fight this in court. I have lawyers." "Mr. Thornton," Patricia interrupted, pulling out a thick folder from her cleaning cart, a cart that had been specially designed to hide her investigation materials. "These aren't minor violations. I've documented expired food being served to guests, dangerous chemicals being used in food preparation areas, unsafe working conditions that violate multiple state laws, and now, in front of numerous witnesses, deliberate abuse of employees and customers." She opened the folder, revealing photograph after photograph of serious health violations. This contaminated meat storage, these improperly mixed cleaning chemicals near food preparation areas, the broken refrigeration units maintaining unsafe temperatures, any one of these could cause serious illness or death among your guests. The crowd of onlookers grew larger as word spread throughout the hotel. Employees who'd been terrified of Bradley for years now watched with amazement as their tormentor faced consequences for his actions. The young waiter Patricia had seen earlier was actually crying tears of relief. Maria appeared in the doorway, having heard the commotion. When she saw Patricia's badge and documentation, her face lit up with understanding and vindication. "I knew something was different about you," she said softly. "You always seemed to notice things others missed." Bradley made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "Even if you shut me down temporarily, I'll be back," he threatened weakly. "I have connections, influence." Patricia shook her head sadly. "Mr. Thornton, threatening a state health inspector is a federal offense. And given the severity of these violations, plus the documented employee abuse and endangerment of public health, the state will be recommending criminal charges. She gestured to all the guests with phones. Everything that happened here today has been recorded by multiple witnesses. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Bradley's empire was crumbling around him, but the real victory wasn't his downfall. It was the transformation already beginning in the faces of his former victims. For the first time in years, the Grandview's employees were standing tall, free from fear, ready to help rebuild their workplace into something worthy of the respect they'd always deserved. 6 months later, Patricia walked through the newly renovated lobby of what was now called the Grandview Community Hotel. The transformation was remarkable, not just in the gleaming surfaces and modern safety equipment, but in the faces of the people working there. Employees smiled genuinely, moved with confidence, and treated each guest with the warmth that came from feeling valued and respected in their workplace. Maria had been promoted to general manager, leading the transition with the kind of compassionate leadership that Bradley had never understood. The staff who'd survived the health department's intervention had become a tight-knit family, united by their shared experience of overcoming workplace abuse. They'd implemented employee safety programs, fair wage policies, and guest service standards that made the hotel a model for the entire industry. Helen and Robert sat at their favorite corner table, enjoying dinner just as they had for 20 years, but now their experience was enhanced by the knowledge that every person serving them was treated with dignity and respect. They'd become advocates for the new hotel, bringing friends and family to support the remarkable transformation they'd witnessed. The legal aftermath had been swift and decisive. Bradley's hotels had been sold to pay fines and victim compensation. He'd spent 3 months in jail for health code violations and employee endangerment, followed by 2 years of community service, ironically, working in soup kitchens where he learned firsthand what it meant to serve others with humility. The experience had been more transformative than anyone expected. Bradley emerged as a different person, dedicating his remaining wealth to worker advocacy programs and apologizing publicly to everyone he'd wronged. Patricia had returned to her regular duties as a senior health inspector, but the Grandview case had become legendary within her department. Her undercover work had led to new protocols for investigating workplace abuse and health violations, protecting countless workers and customers across the state. She'd received commendations from the governor and recognition from worker rights organizations. On this particular evening, Patricia wasn't there for an inspection. She was there as an honored guest for the hotel's reopening celebration. As she walked through the dining room where her confrontation with Bradley had taken place, she reflected on how one moment of standing up for dignity had created ripple effects that continued to spread. Maria approached her with a warm smile. "Patricia, thank you for coming tonight. Would you like to say a few words to everyone?" The dining room was filled with employees, guests, community leaders, and media representatives who'd come to celebrate the hotel's remarkable transformation. Patricia accepted the microphone, looking out at faces that represented hope, resilience, and the power of standing up for what's right. 6 months ago, this place was ruled by fear and cruelty, she began. Tonight, it stands as proof that dignity and respect aren't luxuries, they're the foundation of everything worthwhile. Every person here, whether you're serving food or being served, deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. That's not just good business, it's what makes us human. The applause that followed wasn't just for Patricia's words, but for the journey they'd all taken together from humiliation to hope, from cruelty to community, from fear to freedom. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of justice, redemption, and the reminder that sometimes the most powerful people are those who choose to serve others with dignity and grace.